Welcome back to another edition of the Edge podcast. Publisher Brenden Slaughter here for BeaversEdge.com, joined by Beavers Edge senior writer Ryan Harlan and Beavers Edge writer Brogan Slaughter. The whole Edge crew is here. We're talking Oregon State baseball, baby. They have made Omaha and the College World Series. They took down Florida State in three exciting games over this last weekend. Again, went 2-1 against the Seminoles in a deciding game 3 on Sunday that had a lot of fireworks. We'll be diving into all of it and previewing the matchup Oregon State has against Louisville, in addition to looking at the other teams in their side of the Omaha bracket. But again, welcome back to the Edge podcast. Happy to be joined back by Ryan Harlan and Brogan Slaughter, who I know one of them for sure has finished up school. Ryan, are you good as well? Then I think we have two that have finished up school.
Pretty much in all
Nice.
but formality. So yeah, kind of
To
wild
both of you
that
guys for
that
a
6 years
year.
is done. Yeah, 6 years at Oregon State's done like that of just being a student.
Ryan absolutely finishing it. Brogan just wrapping up year one. My very different stakes, but either way, congratulations to both you guys. Obviously, a year at school is a year at school, man, and you got to be diligent and be on it. I remember it well. So we are now into the summer, and you guys get to enjoy some Beaver baseball. As Ryan so perfectly put in his 3-2-1 story, in the most big Jordan Belfort voice I can say. The show goes on. They're gonna have to take me out of here with a tank. So it's awesome. I think there's a lot to dive into, and it's great to see this team back in Omaha. I forgot just how exciting and special it is. 7 years doesn't seem like that long ago. I remember covering that tournament quite well, and remember it well that whole season, and yet time, right? It's like before COVID, so it has a real like long time ago thing. But we'll kind of dive into the importance of the Beavers making Omaha. Mitch Canham's first trip to Omaha as well. He kind of gets out from under the shadow of Pat Casey in that regard, which I think is super important. You talk about 3 years ago when the Beavers were one win away from Omaha, and then the kind of build up and lead up back to it. I think there was definitely some pressure from the fan base to get back. So I think that's huge for Mitch Canham too. So a lot we're going to dive into, but guys, let's just start with the series over Florida State. Ryan, you were there all three games. Brogan, you were there for Sunday's game. Ryan, let's just start with you. Obviously, every game very, very different. Just kind of break down how this was truly a slugfest between two teams who maybe should have been destined for an Omaha type, matchup because Ryan, this matchup seemed too good to be in a super regional.
Oh yeah, and especially too on paper when we were previewing it, right? Like this was arguably one of, if not the most balanced super regional matchups across the country. And like breaking down through stats, it was like very like slightly different where, Oregon State was slightly better over Florida State in certain areas and Florida State over Oregon State as well. So it's kind of like a vice versa there of just like I think you're just seeing two great teams going at it in the way that we have kind of postseason baseball structured. And it's just kind of unfortunate that, yeah, you couldn't have this at the very end of the season in Omaha, but like
Right.
at the same time though, all baseball's good baseball,
Yes.
right? And that's where I kind of look at it from there. I mean, game one, that looked like Florida State was in the driver's seat pretty much the entire time. And then the comeback in game one, sparked by Jacob Craig at the end there, to send that into extras, like that was huge. And then you knew that Florida State was going to come out with a little bit of a fire lit under them in game two, throwing their best guy on the mound, Jamie Arnold, who has been scouted by the Nationals general manager and ownership
Right.
at some of his games this year. Nationals team, MLB team I'm very fond of.
There you go. Okay.
So
Okay.
there's that,
Yeah.
but I don't think we'll probably draft him given the fact that Ethan Holiday is in this draft. So
Mm.
that's if I had to guess there for what their strategy is. But like Arnold threw a great game, and that threw the Beavers off through most of those 8 to 9 innings there, just because they couldn't adjust at the plate, and especially to after Arnold was out of the game, Peyton Prescott coming in throwing in the high 90s,
Yep.
hundreds, and then really game three was kind of a all right, who wants this more
Mm.
type of deal. I mean, Florida State punched Beavers in the mouth right away with that 2-run shot. and then just the unfolding of Wes Mendez on the mound and just opening up the floodgates there, basically. So you break through that dam with a huge offensive explosion in the bottom of the first. You chase Mendez out of there. You make Florida State go to their bullpen, and I think had not Florida State made some key errors in game three from a pitching standpoint, I do think this game probably would have been a lot closer than what it looked like on paper and what it was when you were watching it. Especially with the fact that, like, you go to two guys, if you're Florida State, you go to two guys that you threw, one on Friday in Joe Charles and then Peyton
Hmm.
Prescott on Saturday in less than 24 hours rest, and the way in which you made those mound visits and pitching changes, I think ultimately played a role in Link Jarrett and his crew not being able to rally late,
Right.
especially with the momentum being on Oregon State's side by then, when they could have had that opportunity earlier on in the game than what they actually did in the eighth and ninth. So
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. And I think now, knowing what we know with hindsight, and Brogan, I'm going to go to you here real quick, or here in just a moment, but I think knowing what we know in hindsight, we now know why they uh, labeled their staff or organized their staff the way that they did. Because we were like, interesting. They're going with Joey Vellini on Friday. They're going with, obviously the ace on Saturday. And then, they're going to go with Wes Mendez on Sunday. And we were kind of curious because we kind of thought that Vellini or, was or Arnold was kind of interchangeable, but Arnold was still, like Ryan said, kind of their top guy. So, like we were talking about early, the way that they shook that out and then the way Wes Mendez got rocked, I almost wonder if they kind of knew he was and I don't mean this too negatively, but just the weakest link of their three. And that's why he was kind of moved to Sunday because like Ryan said, I think in going over to what Brogan wrote about, with FSU's bullpen just kind of running out of gas. And I just think all told, that's pretty much what happened in this game. Like, if you look at how it laid out, I think Florida State sold out to win games one and games two. And when you look at how close they were to winning game one, and then having the dominance of Jamie Arnold on the mound in game two, which we saw, I think that was Link Jarrett's plan. The Beavers winning in 10, I think, just backfired everything from them from a pitching standpoint. So then, they obviously knew they were going to be in a good spot with Arnold on Saturday, and they did. But then to what you guys saw on Sunday, I think then it was a bit of a pitching mess because I think with the way they laid it out and how it was going, they're like, there won't be a Sunday game, was what they were hoping. So credit to Oregon State. And, honestly, Brogan, what did you see how they were just able to knock out a guy in Mendez who his numbers weren't bad by any means. He had 8 wins on the year, as best I can tell, and that's ACC competition.
No, yeah. I mean, Florida State, they had their big three pitchers. Obviously, Jamie Arnold is a great talent, MLB talent, but it seemed like to Link Jarrett's mind, Joey Bellini as a college pitcher, just as good, if not better. They gave him the day one nod. He went out there. I don't remember how many innings total he pitched, but he pitched really well. And we struggled to hit him early on. And they thought they could get that first game with Bellini, and then you can put Arnold in as that guy just to win you that second game. We almost did lose the first game. And if Arnold comes in there, credit to Ethan Kleinschmidt, he pitched really well head to
He
head
did.
against Arnold, maybe even better comparatively, just out of those two outings. And, having three really good starters for Florida State kind of alludes to the fact that they don't have as much bullpen depth, maybe as Oregon State, where you can throw Wyatt Queen, James DeCramer, Eric Segura, all those guys in later, and they were just kind of more top heavy. So if you hit one of those guys, they didn't really have much of a backup plan besides their own guys who already appeared earlier in the series.
Yeah, I mean it's true, and I think pitching depth is everything, and I think it's one thing you guys alluded to in your most recent, 3-2-1 story is like, it's a story as old as time, song as old as rhyme. As far as you go to '06, you go to '07, you go to 18. Every one of the key consistents of those Oregon State national champions is having a deep bullpen. And in 18 and '06, they needed it because they had to come back to the loser side of the Omaha bracket. This year, we saw the bullpen depth needing to be used to come out of the losers bracket of their own regional, right? Because, we can honestly call a spade, fellas. If they don't have a bullpen and say they only had three guys they could really count on, they wouldn't have been able to come back out of their own regional with the way that they had to win four elimination games in a row. So that, after losing the first, you're talking 5 games and needing to have at least five starting arms and beyond that. So I really do think that it shows that the Beavers, like, if anything, and we'll get into kind of Louisville and Omaha here shortly, but if anything, it should give Beaver fans a lot of confidence, I think, guys, going into a double elimination format and think and now just realize, sure, you want to win, you want to be 2-0 and put yourself in the driver's seat of any regional format like we have here for the first part of Omaha. But I think Beaver fans should be really like not too worried if Oregon State suffers a loss because we've seen what they've been able to do. And Ryan, we were kind of talking about it pre-pod. Are you sure you don't want to get like stitched on like a pillow, Mitch Canham? It's meant to be this way because it's like they have a real like, and especially like a double elimination mentality. Like I think they just kind of they don't get too high, get too low, and are able to stay really even keel, and that's going to benefit them because it's baseball. You can have a bad game and just have an off day, and I think knowing what we saw, the Beavers have the arms and the ability to come back through the loser side of the bracket if they were put into that position, which I think is awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. And also too, it's like Mitch has said that this entire time, and we've kind of, have asked him that about that at pressers after the regional and after the super regional. And well, I think it's just the team adopting his mindset and the rest of his coaching staff of like the moment's not too big for us. And even now, if you probably ask them about their kind of run to get here to Omaha, they'd probably tell you it's like, yeah, sure, that's fine and all, but we're more focused on Louisville. We got a job to do. Like that's essentially what this is. Like I think they do have that confidence. Now like it's very much a reaffirming of like, oh yeah, we've done this. We can do this again. Like I think that's without a doubt. But like I think now it's more of just turning their sights onto Louisville and a quest for a fourth national championship. And I do think though as well too, credit to Florida State in the performance that they gave, but also too, I think a little bit might have been the moment kind of getting a little too big, especially in game 3, and some of those decisions kind of having to scramble when things kind of got away from Link Jarrett and his
Right.
squad there. And you bring in Joe Charles, who struggled in game 1 towards the end there, and was the guy on that helped spark that comeback,
Right.
basically being on the mound for the Beavers. And then you bring in Prescott, who is on short rest, and a quick, very short turnaround there. And I don't know about you, Brendan or Brogan, but I've never seen a pitching change happen on a full count. That is probably the weirdest decision I
Yeah.
think was ever made in that game. And I think that was one where it kind of just was like um, a little moment got too big there, and
Ye-
overthinking such a thing where it's like
well,
if a guy's at a full
yeah.
count, let him pitch, and fight another day,
And,
basically.
and and you have to throw in too, and I want to get both your guys' thoughts on this as we wrap up and start to look ahead to Omaha too. We talked about this leading up, folks. I know we probably harped on it, but for those who are, just kind of tuning in, checking in on the Beavers, now that they're getting towards Omaha and we bring in a bigger audience, this is why all season long, Ryan and Brogan and I talked about how important it was to stack up wins, how important it was to be a top 8 national seed. Because in February and in March, when you're sitting there saying stack wins for a national seed, it sounds, just, it's not something a lot of people will be like, oh yeah, pay attention to because it's such a long season. You have to build up. But all that effort gets you to here. And fellas, I'm going to be blunt with you. If this series was in Tallahassee, I probably would have went with Florida State given just how close these razor margins are, just like we saw Oregon State, against Kentucky last year. I think home field advantage and got to give it to Goss. Goss got him. Boo to the water wall, the beer wall is my kind of thing. On this Edge podcast, we are beer wall friendly. Um, but
As
all that
Homer
to,
Simpson said, to alcohol, the cause of and solution to all of life's problems.
agreed, and all that to say, I really think home field advantage was the difference. If Oregon State's not a top 8 national seed, I don't know if the super regional goes the same way we're talking the same way we are now. I think that's how razor thin the margins are, and I think Goss was the absolute difference this weekend. What do you guys think?
2-0 with the beer wall, 0-1 with the water wall. Do with that what you will. The razor thin
Not bad.
margin. Florida State, amazing team. I think it's almost a crime that they're not in Omaha with these other 8 teams or in replace of one of these 8 teams. They're a really damn good squad. And beating a team like that in the Supers shows you that you can compete with the LSUs, the Arkansas, the Coastals in Omaha. But Goss, like we said, crucial to the having Goss behind you, especially when Florida State opens the game with a 2-run homer and it gets a little quiet and you need some of that just Goss power behind you. Like
Mm.
you go to the bottom half of the inning, smack a couple home runs yourself, and you just don't look back. Like the home field advantage is so huge. Like you said, it kind of overlooked early in the season, but it is big because the difference between coming from Tallahassee to Corvallis versus the reverse of that is major. Like you said, I probably also would have taken Florida State if it happened to be down there. And not to discredit the other 8 teams in Omaha, the other 7. There's 5 national seeds. Arizona's a great team. Louisville's a great team. Knocked off Vanderbilt. Murray State's a bit of a Cinderella, but Florida State easily could have been one of those teams and could have had a deep run.
It's true, and Ryan, kind of your thoughts too. Just probably echoing a lot of the same about the Goss
Yeah,
magic.
yeah, no, it's yeah, Goss is always electric, right? Like it's one thing during the regular season, but then you get to postseason play, you get to a regional, super regional play, it goes up one step there. And from that beer wall, like seeing that there, that's just a byproduct of fans having fun and
Yeah.
enjoying the environment, right? Like seeing the pictures of that on on Sunday and how tall that thing got, it's like dudes rock, man.
Yep.
That's the best way you can summarize that up right there. And yeah, like it's just cool to be like I took that in after the game on Sunday. It was just one of those where like, you get to be a small part of that like collective environment, right? And I remember my first baseball game I ever covered in the postseason was Auburn in 2022 in the super regionals.
Yep.
That crowd was electric as well, but Oregon State falls short in that game.
Yep.
And then this time around, they punched their ticket to go to Omaha. It's like a nice little, storybook close on a chapter there, which was
Yeah.
kind of cool of being a student here and being able to see that. It's cool. It's like it's a surreal experience that I think it's really hard to describe in words unless like you're actually there and you're actually
It's
in the
true.
stadium. Like to from an outsider's perspective, like I could not like properly describe what that atmosphere was like on Sunday night just because of how meaningful this moment was for Beaver fans, the team, Mitch Canham, Pat Casey. Just like it was arguably one of the most like exciting environments I think I've ever been in at Goss as a student here. Yeah.
Yeah, no. And that's the thing, Ryan, you never know. I'm gonna pass a little voodoo magic because it was my last year at Oregon State when they won it in 18, and very much like you, I was like, "Oh, man, going to Omaha. I'm done, cool." And then it was like, "Oh, that run wasn't quite over." And as we talked about in our pre-podcast, I'm sure a lot of Beaver fans, myself included, fondly remember the 2018 championship parade experience that began in Portland and made its way all the way down to Corvallis. And that's obviously, guys, what the Beavers are going to be gunning for. And, they're not, like Ryan said, they're not content to be there, right? Like, this is not a program, and I don't mean to be, one of the things that I think is fascinating about Oregon State baseball, and it really started back in the Mitch Canham era, early Pat Casey time, it is, kind of those unwritten rules. You see schools across the country, particularly Murray State, others, you get to Omaha, it's a big thing. Oregon State, you don't dogpile until you win in Omaha because that is the standard for Oregon State. You see other schools, they'll dogpile after a regional. You see other schools, they'll even, I think Murray State might have even done it when they took Duke to go to Omaha. And that's where it's like, in a way, I'm not trying to discount Murray State, but Murray State, in a sense, like Brogan said, they're probably really happy to be there. Kind of like UTSA would have been if they could have taken out UCLA, is like, for a program like that, again, no disrespect to Murray State, I watched them a little bit, but to me, they're still the Fighting John Morants because that's literally the only person I know from Murray State. So I just,
Yeah.
so just looking at it all as it dives in, fellas, the Beavers have the third best odds to win the College World Series, and they are tied with Coastal Carolina. But let me go ahead and run it down for you guys if you haven't checked it out at Beaver's Edge. So, top of the list is Arkansas. The Razorbacks are favored to win the whole thing. They are a plus 200, which is the lowest of any of the teams. However, their opponent is number two, LSU at plus 230. Those two teams have to play. There is no physical possible way, folks. Those two teams can meet in the championship. So one of those teams will be knocked out, regardless. So when you think about that and look at it that way, you've got Oregon State and Coastal Carolina, who are, I would say, arguably, two of the best teams on that side of the bracket, both coming in at plus 650. UCLA plus 850, Arizona plus 1400, Louisville plus 1600, Murray State plus 35. So when I look at this, fellas, there's not a whole lot of, as far as betting respect for Louisville, Arizona, getting into the thousands. You look at this, even Oregon State, Coastal Carolina at plus 650 seems like a decent bet. Like, there seems to be a lot of confidence that LSU or Arkansas is going to make their way towards the championship here. But I found it interesting because, third best odds is still nothing to scoff at. And I think once you knock out one of those two teams above you, I think it's really, and we'll get into our predictions coming up Beaver's Edge tomorrow, but for my money, barring anything crazy, I see Oregon State and Coastal duking it out on their side of the bracket, and most likely Arkansas LSU on the other side.
Yeah,
So you're
it's
telling me
hard.
there's a chance then?
Yes.
Yeah.
Uh, Going back to what you just said a little bit, Ryan was in the media room. I think somebody else referred to our celebration on Sunday as a dog pile, to which Mitch Canham shut down very, very
Absolutely,
quickly.
he did.
Goes, dog
The
pile? No, no,
standard
no, no,
is
no,
the
no, no.
standard.
We once a year, and it's in Nebraska.
Yep.
No dog piles in Corvallis, so that's great.
I love it.
It's easy to take the top seeds. I think LSU I might have slightly above Arkansas. Coastal Carolina is really good. I think Arizona and Louisville as those other two are maybe slightly better than UCLA and Murray State, in my opinion, not to discredit UCLA.
Sure.
But just historically, Arizona's always been really good. Louisville's playing probably their best baseball right now. So it's a hard pick, really. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I mean it's one that we're definitely going to be kind of teasing. And again, just looking at the Louisville matchup itself, guys, compared to what we saw against Florida State, where it was nearly even in the betting market had truly no idea who they liked in the Florida State, Oregon State, any of the games really. Oregon State is a pretty comfortable favorite on Louisville as it currently stands. They got a 1.5 spread on runs, over under at 9.5, and Oregon State a minus 190. So the Beavers will be favored in this game against Louisville. And interestingly enough, I found it kind of interesting that this is only the second time in school history the Beavers have played Louisville, and the only other time, 2013 in Omaha in an elimination type situation, and Oregon State picked up the 11-4 victory. Not super clear in the mind, but I'm like, I can remember Ben Wetzer on the mound for that game. So, it's kind of crazy how time flies, but two teams, Ryan and Brogan, who are not familiar with each other, haven't played much at all, and let's just kind of get into it for the bulk of the rest of the podcast, and we'll kind of tease the other teams as well, because as Brogan mentioned, I think we got a dandy of a matchup between Coastal and Arizona too, because Coastal, the most wins left in the field. They're creeping up on 60 wins. They've dominated throughout the year. I think they're showing why they could have been a national seed in some considerations. And then Arizona, who not only took out Oregon in the Eugene Regional, then went to Chapel Hill and took out North Carolina, who I think was one of the best teams in the field too. So nothing to scoff at in that regard. But Ryan, I'm just kind of curious your thoughts on Oregon State and Louisville, and then we'll go to Brogan next. But just two teams who are very differing styles. And man, Louisville is aggressive. They are going to test Wilson Weber and his arm behind the plate. Louisville has the seventh most stolen bases in the country this year, Ryan. 155. They are actually, I'll go ahead and take it a step further. The top ranked Power 5 team, or Power 4 team, whatever you want to call it, when they're all smaller schools ahead of them. When it comes to stolen bases, they've only been caught stealing, Ryan, 20 times. Comparatively, and I just had to kind of look at numbers to see, Oregon State's only took 36 swipes all year. So, successfully taken 36 swipes all year out of 51 attempts. So very differing styles here. And Louisville is going to be very aggressive. They like to run. And I imagine, this is a game where you're really going to have to be tight with command. We expect to see Dax Whitney on the mound for the Beavers. He's going to need to be tight with his command because Louisville strikes me as a team. They get free runners, extra walks, guys on base. They're going to move and put a lot of pressure on needing to throw guys out. And, that's, not to say Wilson Weber hasn't been successful with that, but I think it's going to be a great test.
Oh yeah, definitely. And that's where I think this game is going to come down to, in
Mm.
my opinion there. I mean, if you can control the base paths, if you're Wilson Weber from behind the plate, I think that's where you easily can win this game. And two, like you've seen that the Beavers, at least now after the Oregon series, what Oregon was able to do with how they were stealing bases in that 4 game stretch, like they've gotten a lot better at controlling the base paths, and you've seen pitchers being checking the runner, before they get into their setup there on the mound and in the stretch, and that's something where it's just kind of one of those where I think they're doing a lot better at it, but now it's more of like you got a team that can really do it a lot better than what Oregon was doing it at this season, and it's going to be probably, I think, one of the keys to the game. And Mitch has said that we know that they like to be aggressive, and we got to be paying attention to that come Friday. And I do think that they'll have a game plan in place for that, but it's more of a matter of like if you can control that aspect of the game, I think you're in a good position to set yourself up for a matchup between either Arizona or Coastal, depending on who comes out of that side of your bracket there in that game one matchup.
So that's the offensive side, and I definitely agree with Ryan. I think it's going to be interesting chess match, and I'll come back to you first after I go to Brogan here because I want to get your thoughts on what you think the lineup could look like in that game one, Ryan. But over to you, Brogan, on the pitching side of it. You were kind of looking at the numbers and kind of, we know who's going to be on the mound for Louisville in this matchup, and let me make sure. Patrick Forbes, 4-2 with a 4.36 ERA, but. To me, it seems like Oregon State's got a pretty significant advantage in the pitching numbers. And that's one thing that I'm kind of curious here just to look at. Again, you look at pitching and defense. Oregon State's got an ERA that's, a whole run better. Their whip significantly better. K rate significantly better. They walk roughly the same amount. Louisville a little bit more. OBP or opponents OBP. Louisville's higher. Louisville's not quite as good fielding either, and Louisville does commit an error a game. So I'm just kind of curious your thoughts on how I think on paper, if Oregon State could get to Patrick Forbes semi early, I think you'd like your chances in this matchup. And I don't know if Louisville necessarily has the pitching depth to go as deep as maybe Oregon State does.
Yeah, I mean, just like Florida State, like you obviously want to jump on them early, and I think in Dax Whitney, you got a really good strikeout pitcher right there, decent ground ball pitcher. But with Louisville being as quick as they are, just limiting as many free passes as you can. We've had some walk issues throughout the regionals and the supers, and just allowing guys to get on and if they can get that guy in scoring position, like that goes right to the small ball aspect that OSU likes to play. So you got to be careful there. But like Ryan was saying, and you were saying, a lot more checks at first base in the regionals, back picks from Wilson Weber, just keeping guys honest and not maybe giving them up as freely as they were in the Oregon series. So keeping guys honest on the base path, limiting walks is going to be huge, and then getting guys on in our own right in the lineup. And as OSU loves to do, button them over. I think 1 through 9 in the lineup, you got guys that can lay it down one way or another. They really, really were abusing Joey Bellini with that when he came off the mound really far to the opposite side, bunting down the third base line. That worked out really, really well for us. And then just my little note on the lineup, I'm hoping a big, big game out of Arquette not being at Goss. He seems to be twice or triple the player playing away. He loves showing off for the away crowd. So I want to see a big day from him.
See, I think Brogan, just with how many road games they had, like, that's the other thing that's so unique about this team, and the reason that I think this team, like, it took me a little while, but I can remember in 18, like after they're coming up short in 17, like you couldn't have convinced me in 2018 that Oregon State wasn't going to win the championship. I just felt it was destined that year to an extent. And when you think about like this year, like, sure, in a normal year where Oregon State played a normal amount of home games and then you go to Omaha after being at Goss for 2 weekends, yeah, you might be like, oh, darn, kind of miss Goss a little bit, just even for a moment. But this year, the fact that they played so much on the road, guys, I think it's just like, yep, another road trip. Now we get to go somewhere really, really cool. Like, I think they're well prepared for just anything that could be thrown at them, Ryan, as far as what Omaha could show over the next, I guess at minimum 2 games, at maximum a whole lot more, right?
Oh yeah, 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 and that's where like I think too that confidence comes from, right? They're like, yeah, we've been on the road, we've seen a bunch of teams,
Yeah.
we've seen a bunch of different styles of baseball. We don't care.
Yeah,
Like
just
we're like we
keep
don't
on
care.
going.
Let's keep this show going. Like job's not finished. That's basically what was said even post game. So from both Cannon Reader and Trent Caraway, and then speaking on the lineup, which I know Trent Caraway for game three was against the Seminoles was in the leadoff spot. And Mitch basically said, hey, look, like you're going to see a lot more Trent in that leadoff spot, and made a little fun apropos comparison to the film
Okay.
300. But I heard no this is Corvallis from Trent in there. So I never heard any of that, but that's besides the point. I digress slightly there. You're going to see a lot more of him in there as well too, and then with the fact that Easton Talt was in the lineup for game three, and Carson McIntyre took his spot in right field,
Mm.
I wonder how much more we will see of Carson McIntyre in the lineup as well, in addition to Trent Caraway being in the leadoff spot. I think you got a bunch of guys 1 through 9 that you can mix and match in any way. And Mitch has kind of said his whole philosophy is like, all right, this guy's going to get on base. This guy's going to get a double. This guy's going to hit a home run. This guy will get a
Right.
triple. This guy will get a walk. So it's kind of like, I think, you can kind of mix and match it based off of matchup. And I think that's probably where maybe the Trent Caraway leadoff spot goes, is
Mm.
in a matchup that you think is really favorable. And then you probably have Carson McIntyre in there, who I think has earned at least some time in Omaha to be in right field, because that man, not only with the solo shot, right, that he had in game three, but the fact that he could have had another, Brendan, he could have
Yeah.
had another,
Yep.
murdered a baseball
He
in
did.
front of thousands at Goss that
He
would
did.
have gone towards downtown
He did.
had it
I
stayed
mean,
fair.
so do you think he will be at the expense of Easton Talt, or what do you think? Because at the certain point, Gavin Turley ain't going anywhere. I guess you could move things around, and if you really wanted to DH Gavin Turley, you could. But like, other than that, like Turley's gonna be in left. Cannon Reader's been pretty consistent in center, with the exception of maybe Dallas Macias in a pinch role or what have you. But then you get out to right, and you're like, yeah, I mean, like, do you think McIntyre's earned that nod over Tall as we go? Or do you think it'll purely be matchups and we're going to be at Mitch's mercy and just wait and see what happens?
I think a little bit it's just going to be at Mitch's mercy, to
Yeah,
be quite honest with you, because like I mean the reason why I think that was switched was because Tall struck out back to back to back to back
it was
times
tough. Yeah.
against Jamie Arnold. Now Jamie Arnold's a good pitcher, but also too you can't have your leadoff guy do that either in a game like that. So I think yes, it might be matchup based, and we'll be at Mitch's mercy for figuring out what the lineups are going to be throughout this whole course of being at Omaha for Oregon State. But I do think though that from just seeing what Carson McIntyre did in Game 3, like I think you probably give a little more consideration than you probably were going to coming into the postseason. I mean, he did not play at all in Game 1 or Game 2,
Mm.
or even in the regional either. And the fact that he was able to come off the bench, get into right field, and in his first sort of at bat of the postseason, hits a solo shot. Like that's that. Like
Yeah.
it's you kind of have to almost ride the hot hand a little bit.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. And just, as we're wrapping up here, guys, just a little bit of time left. Just kind of final thoughts. Obviously, we'll be talking. Make sure to stay tuned to BeaversEdge.com as we'll all be on the damn board and everything and check out all of our preview content and our predictions that are coming up tomorrow. But just final thoughts, guys, real quick from each of you on Oregon State being in Omaha and what you're looking forward to.
Yeah, I mean, like Ryan saying, the way McIntyre's been crushing the ball, you think that he's going to get a look. Easton Tall, Florida State's lineup was a lot of left-handed pitchers, so that's not super favorable. But I don't think it's the last we're going to see of Easton Tall in Omaha. He'll definitely get his reps back in. But like we're also saying, playing away in Nebraska, it's neutral site, but the Beavers don't have any worries about playing on the road. They can do it. They've proven they can do it. And I think this matchup against Louisville is going to be really telling, but telling in a good way. And I think we have the pitching depth and the lineup that's really, really hot. Bats are hot. They're going to get it done.
All right, Ryan, 30 seconds for you. Go quick. Signing off the Edge podcast.
We sleep in July. That's
I
all I
love
got to
it.
say.
I love
That's
it.
all I got to
See,
say.
that is the perfect way to end it. Ryan is 100% right. Take that Rostianism and make it a Ryan Harlanism. I absolutely love it. Appreciate both you guys joining. Congrats on finishing up your respective years at school. Make sure to stay tuned to BeaversEdge.com. For all three of us, we'll have great content leading up all the way through Omaha. You've got BeaversEdge.com.